And our final speaker of the afternoon is here from the Denver Academy in Colorado. Please welcome Philippe Ernewein.
In 1994, I was a recent college graduate with an organization called Teach for America, a nonprofit still active today, placing teachers in needy, under-resourced areas around the country. And I landed just outside of New Orleans at East St. John High School, home of the Wildcats. My classroom was a double-wide trailer behind the bricks and mortar of the school building, in special education, self-contained. My students, my amazing group of students, came to me with labels like behaviorally disordered, emotionally disturbed, mentally retarded, oppositionally defiant. These labels were not helpful, and they also were not accurate. There was a shortage in special education at the time, impacting 12% of the student body, or 6 million students. And as an English language learner in the late 1970s, I had insider information. I'd had an IEP. I rode the short bus to school. I felt an affinity with this 12%, although I preferred the Flemish words for special education, bijzondere onderwijs, which translates to extraordinary teaching and learning. And at the beginning of my career, I didn't know that there was an arc of inclusion or where my trailer might fit in that arc. My first impressions of special education were riding that notorious short bus. I remember the social capital that I paid as an 8-year-old, hiding behind the pillars in front of Catoctin Elementary in Leesburg, Virginia, hoping that my peers, that my friends would not see me get on and off that bus. Born in Belgium, Flemish was my native language, and I remember one of my good friends, Edwin, had Down syndrome. He is not in this class picture, although I am. And I remember asking my mom why he didn't go to school with us, and hearing my least favorite Flemish word, achterlijk. Achterlijk is defined as backward or slow, and these were not words that I associated at all with Edwin. And that brings me to the question that I've been grappling with and thinking about, which is, what did America do with the students on the edges at the beginning of schooling? And the short answer is they weren't let in. The arc of inclusion starts in a very dark place, in the field of eugenics, because difference was pathologized. If you had a learning disability, physical, mental, or otherwise, you were weeded out, segregated, placed in institutions like the state asylum of unteachable idiots in New York. The proponents of this movement of eugenics were individuals like Francis Galton, whose work and studies and speeches were followed closely by Adolf Hitler, and also groups like the Immigration Restriction League, who lobbied for literacy tests for all based on the faulty belief that somehow your value or your worth was tied to your ability to read English. We now land here near Lynchburg, Virginia. At the Colony for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic, we find Carrie Buck, labeled disabled, poor, uneducated, and a single mother. Her mother is there as well. Feeble-minded at the time is defined as individuals having trouble reading or writing, also having potentially poor character. Her case leads us to the Supreme Court, where Oliver Wendell Holmes proclaims that 3 generations of imbeciles is enough, and Carrie Buck is forced to go through sterilization. She is the first of over 70,000 such individuals which this happens to. And eugenics movement brought tremendous shame to individuals with disabilities, like the work here of James Edward Deeds, his artwork pulled from a trash can outside of State Hospital number 3 in Missouri. 1974 finds most of the Sterilization Act has been repealed, and Congress does its homework. They study, what does America do with students with disabilities? 2 million simply don't go to school, and another 3 million who are in school are not getting the services that they so desperately need and deserve and require. And that research leads us to Public Law 94142. 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. We know this today as IDEA. It has been reauthorized and amended many times, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it is this act that is used over many cases for parents who are fighting for equity for their children, most notably Hendrick Hudson Central School District, who refuses to provide a sign language interpreter for Amy Rowley, who is deaf. The court comes back and says that actually public schools do not need to provide sign language interpreters for deaf students who are otherwise receiving an adequate education. From the actual law, it says that the law was not to provide for handicapped children's full potential, but simply to give them access. The last case we find is near Denver, Colorado, in Douglas County, near my school. Andrew, a student on the autism spectrum, has had IEPs for a number of years, and at the end of 4th grade, his parents deemed that his progress is not adequate anymore. He's not making the social and academic progress that they're expecting, and they enroll him in an independent private school where he makes significant gains in the first year. Per due process and IDEA, Douglas County comes back, offers a new IEP, and the parents deem it no better than the first. They then ask the Colorado Department of Education to reimburse them for that independent private school tuition where Andrew had been doing so well, and that request is denied. The case goes to the Supreme Court, where we read now from Justice Roberts' unanimous decision, where when all is said and done, a student receiving merely more than the bare minimum progress from year to year is like not having an education at all. So, Dr. King, the arc of the moral universe is long, and also in special education, it bends towards justice. I believe it is our work to know the story of those on the fringes, those on the edges, to create the spaces and opportunities for those who are often marginalized and voiceless. Thank you.